Good afternoon. You've caught me on a lovely sunny day, just about to sow my autumn hardy annuals. And the reason why I'm sowing the hardy annuals now in late August is to try and get a kickstart on the flowers in spring. So I'm not expecting the flowers to be in bloom over winter, but they should flower earlier and more vigorously next spring or early summer. So if you're interested in finding out why you would do this and the technique I use to do it, then just follow along. And if we haven't met before, I'm Nicola. I'm a home gardener in Shropshire in the UK, and I like to grow flowers as efficiently and productively as possible. Now, that efficiency could be construed as being lazy, but really it's just that I have limited time and therefore I want to put the most amount of effort where it's needed and not waste time doing stuff or doing extra steps in a process that isn't required. So I'm here for the quick wins. So, hardy annuals. Hardy annuals means that they are frost tolerant. So in theory, they should be able to withstand a certain amount of frost without dying. Now, I'm not going to guarantee that if you live somewhere that is particularly cold, then they may not survive. But certainly here in the UK, we don't have that harsh a winter. If we get to -10, it's a cold winter. So they should withstand in that temperature, hardy annuals. So what we can do is plant them now, late August or autumn, and get them started so that there's less to do in spring. And I'm all for the less work in spring because it is a frenzy in spring. There is always so much to do. So if we can do something now to save on that, then that's a great asset in my toolbox, I believe. So, as I say, the hardy annuals should survive. I try and sow them in August to start with because I want the seedlings to be big enough to be planted outside where possible. I am also this year going to have some inside in protection in the greenhouse because last year, as we all know, slugs ate everything. So they may well have stood the winter, but they didn't withstand the slugs. So I am going to do belt and braces and have some in the ground and some in the greenhouse and just compare what works best. I am making things slightly difficult for myself this year, but I just want to make sure I have some plants ready to go in the spring. So I don't have many plants that I want to sow actually. I often, one of the traps I often fall into is buying too many seeds and then having too many on the go. And in reality, I don't want to fall into that again. So I am focusing this year on drying my flowers. So I really only want to be picking flowers that I think may well dry well. So with that in mind, I have a list of hardy annuals that I am going to be sowing. And my plan is that these hardy annuals will be good and ready to go, let's say early June next year, fully flowered out by end of July, by which point the flowers that I would sow in spring, whether they're the same varieties that I sow again, but more likely they're going to be tender annuals, so straw flowers, limoniums or status, zinnias, things like that, that I definitely can't sow over winter. They will all be sown next year in spring and they will start flowering July. So hopefully there's no gap hopefully the flowers start early, and I don't need, because I'm not going to be using them throughout the season, these hardy annuals that I'm sowing now will be finished by July. I'll have my stock of them drying and ready to be used later in the year, and then my tender annuals will be the ones that I'll be focusing on. So hopefully it will mean that I am making better use of my beds. I'm not duplicating the flowers, and maybe I might just squeeze in a little bit more room for a few more dahlias. I shouldn't, but I know I probably will buy some more. So that's what I'm thinking I'm going to do. So in order to save a bit of time this year, I have round about 12 seeds that I want to sow. So things like Orlea, Ami Visnaga, Ami Majus, Larkspur, we'll give that a go, Nigella, Cornflower, Gomphrena, Pennycress, and some bunny tails. Ideally, if you were to be a perfect gardener, they would all be sown under the perfect conditions, in each to their own tray, sown at the right level that they require, in the right growing conditions, etc, etc. I haven't got time for all that. That's quite a lot of seeds to get sown. So I am using these module trays that I got. They're Charles Dowding module trays. They should last forever, and they are so solid. And I can just, they're small enough that they don't take much room up, and they should be able to produce a seedling of a size that I can plant out, hopefully by the end of September. That's my plan. So they're the ones that are going outside. If there are sufficient left over, then I can then transplant them into bigger modules to be able to over the winter. Because there's not sufficient compost in these modules to help the seedlings continue growing throughout the winter. So they either need to be transplanted into the ground or transplanted into bigger modules. But to get things going now, I can use these. And the beauty of these is that they have big holes in the bottom, so they're really easy to get the seedlings out, unlike other modules that I've used in the past that are really tricky. So these are really good. The drawback with these that I found, this is my first year using them, in spring I really failed using them. I didn't recognise that they required more watering than the usual seed trays. So your standard seed tray that I usually plant in. I didn't realise they needed us watering more often, and therefore they dried out and all of the seedlings died. With the biennials, I was a little bit more prepared for that, plus they were outside, and so the rain helped with the watering. And so I was able to take the biennial seedlings and then pot them on into other pots, and so I'm hoping to do something similar now for the hardy annuals. Because of the number of seeds I've got, I am going to sow, I've actually got bigger trays than this, and I don't know why I picked up the smaller one to show you, but they are 6 modules across and 10 wide, so 60 modules per tray, and actually 2 of these are 60 as well, but 13 each of these. That means that I can, and I've got 12 seeds I want to sow, I believe. I can use 10 cells for each seed variety, and that will hopefully give me 10 seedlings that I can plant out. Now 10 seedlings of something like Ami Majus, Ami Visnaga, Orlea, they're quite big plants. That is more than enough. In fact, 5 would be ample. So hopefully, even if only 50% germinate, I'm happy. But theory being, I am going to use the one big tray to sow, or in fact, I've got 2 bigger trays, 60 cells each, and I'm going to plant all of my autumn sown hardy annuals into those trays. and I will just accept that they're all going to sit outside in my watering area, and they will just hopefully grow even, and then I can pop them on as and when needed easily, even if other seedlings haven't yet grown, because these are so easy to get seedlings out that I won't necessarily be disturbing other plants that are not quite as far along. So that's the plan. I can, of course, sow the seedlings a little bit later than this, so even up into October, if they're going to stay in the greenhouse. So if this doesn't work, I still have time to be able to sow them and just make sure I keep them in the greenhouse, because they're not going to be big enough to be planted out in the garden. So let's get going. So let's get mixing up the seed compost. It doesn't take much compost in this tray, so I am going to keep it quite light, trying to keep it as moisture retentive as possible, which is why I'm using vermiculite, because it actually helps to retain some moisture. So I don't need much, and then I'm just using standard multi-purpose peat-free compost. So let's put get a good mix. I kind of think that might be enough. I might just do one more scoop. Just in case. Right, so just to make sure everything is in. Right. Another problem with sowing the same seeds or different seeds in the same tray is that some are sown at different depths. So again, you've got that issue as well. So ideally, you'd sow them all separately and deal with each variety as is specified. But me being lazy, I just want one tray and make it easy on myself, and we'll see. So now this needs to soak up some water before I sow the seeds. So I have a tray of water, and I'm just going to let it sit there for half an hour, think about life, whilst I have a cup of tea and think about my life. Okay, as you can see, the water uptake wasn't great, so I've watered it from above, and what actually has happened is some of the cells have actually lost most of their compost. So I'm just going to top that up, but as I say, it's the watering of this particular module that seems tricky for me. I haven't yet got the hang of it. I do like to water from underneath. But it didn't seem to uptake it that time. But we're done now, so let's move on. And I'm going to try and just get one seed per cell. Easier said than done when some of them are so tiny. Press it down and then move on to the next. Right, there we have it. All complete. So there we have it. I have planted my 12 sets of seeds. I found with the second tray, because it was quite difficult to get the compost damp, didn't seem to be taking the water up as well as I had expected. I watered the compost itself before putting it into the seed tray, and that seemed to work a lot better. that's similar to how you would do it for soil blocks. So I took that aspect of soil blocking and put it in here, and hopefully the seeds are moist enough to start germinating. So we'll give it a couple of weeks and see what happens. If you found any of the ideas that I've shared in this video useful, then do drop me a like below and give me a comment on what you are sowing this autumn. That's all for now. Until next time, happy gardening!